Good morning. This is the third and final installment of Immigration in the National Interest. It is Tuesday, December 26th. Welcome to Story Time. The economy we're living in today is in no small part a result of the 1965 Act, which opened the door to mass immigration of unskilled and low-skilled workers, primarily through unlimited family chain migration. And that's not an economy anyone should be satisfied with. Today, we have about 1 million immigrants per year. That's like adding the population of Montana every year, or the population of Arkansas every 3 years. But only 1 in 15 of those million of immigrants comes here for employment-based reasons. The vast majority come here simply because they happen to be related to somebody already here. That's why, for example, we have more Somalia-born residents than Australia-born residents, even though Australia is nearly twice the size of Somalia, and Australians are better prepared, as a general matter, to integrate and assimilate into the American way of life. In sum, over 36 million immigrants, or 94% of the total, have come to America over the last 50 years for reasons having nothing to do with employment. And that's to say nothing of the over 24 million illegal immigrants who have come here. Put them together and you have 60 million immigrants, legal and illegal, who did not come to this country because of a job offer or because of their skills. That's like adding almost the entire population of the United Kingdom. And this is still leaving aside the millions of temporary guest workers who we import every year into our country. Unlike many open border zealots, I don't believe the law of supply and demand is magically repealed for the labor markets. This means that our immigration system has been depressing wages for people who work with their hands and on their feet. Wages for Americans with high school diplomas are down to 2% since the late 1970s. For Americans who didn't finish high school, they're down by a staggering 17%. Although immigration has a minimal effect overall on the wages of Americans, it has a severe negative effect on low-skilled workers, minorities, and even recent immigrants. Is automation to blame in part? Sure. Globalized trade? Yes, of course. But there's no denying that a steady supply of cheap, unskilled labor has hurt working-class wages as well. Among those three factors, immigration policy is the one that we can control most easily for the benefit of American workers. Yet, we've done the opposite. I know the response of open border enthusiasts. They plead that we need a steady supply of cheap and unskilled labor because there are jobs that no American will do. But that just isn't so. There is no job Americans won't do. In fact, there's no industry in America in which the majority of workers are not naturally born Americans. Not landscapers, not construction workers, not ski instructors, not lifeguards, not resort workers, not child care workers. Not a single job that overeducated elites associate with immigrants. The simple fact is, if the wage is decent and the employers observe the law, Americans will do any job. And for tough, dangerous, and physically demanding jobs, maybe working folks do deserve a bit of a raise. No American will do that job. Let me just pause for a moment and confess how much I detest that sentiment. In addition to being ignorant of the economic facts, it's insulting, condescending, and demeaning to our countrymen. Millions of Americans make our hotel beds and build our houses and clean our offices. Imagine how they feel when they hear some pampered elite say no American will do their job. And finally, I must say, that sentiment also carries more than a whiff of the very prejudice of which they accuse those concerned about the effects of mass immigration. But the harmful impact on blue-collar workers isn't the only problem with the current system. Because we give 2/3 of our green cards to relatives of people here, there are huge backlogs in the system. This forces highly talented immigrants to wait in line for years behind applicants whose only claim to naturalization is a random family connection to someone who happened to get here years ago. We therefore lose out on the very best talent coming into our country, the ultra-high skilled immigrants who can come to America, stand on their own 2 feet, pay taxes, and through their entrepreneurial spirit and innovation create more and higher paying jobs for our citizens. To put it simply, we have an immigration system that is badly failing Madison's test of increasing the wealth and strength of the community. It might work to the advantage of a favored few, but not for the common good, and especially not the good of working class Americans. This is why I've introduced legislation to fix our naturalization system. It's called the RAISE Act, R-A-I-S-E. Reforming American Immigration for a Strong Economy. The RAISE Act will correct the flaws in the 1965 Act by reorienting our immigration system towards foreigners who have the most to contribute to our country. It would create a skills-based point system similar to Canada's and Australia's. Here's how it would work. When people apply to immigrate, they'd be given an easy-to-calculate score on a scale of 0 to 100. Based on their education, age, job salary, investment ability, English language skills, and any extraordinary achievements. Then, twice a year, the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services would invite the top scorers to complete their applications, and it would invite enough high-scoring applicants to fill the current 140,000 annual employment-based green card slots. We'd still admit spouses and unmarried minor children of citizens and legal permanent residents, but we'd end the preferences for most extended and adult family members. No more unlimited chain migration. We'd also eliminate the so-called diversity visa lottery, which hands out green cards randomly without regard to skills or family connections, and which is plagued by fraud. We'd remove per-country caps on immigration, too, so that high-skilled applicants aren't shut out of the process simply because of their country of origin. And finally, we'd cap the number of refugees offered permanent residency to 50,000 per year, in line with the recent average for the Bush era and most of the Obama era, and still quite generous. Add it all up, and our annual immigration pool would be younger, higher skilled, and ready to contribute to our economy without using welfare as more than half of immigrant households do today. No longer would we distribute green cards essentially based on random chance, nor would we import millions of unskilled workers to take jobs from blue-collar Americans and undercut their wages. And over a 10-year period, our annual immigration levels would decrease by half, gradually returning to historical norms. Given current events, this legislation is timelier than ever. Earlier this month, President Trump announced that he would wind down over 6 months the unconstitutional Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program, also known as DACA. President Obama abused his authority with DACA, which purported to give legal status to illegal immigrants who arrived here as children and who are now in their 20s and 30s. Because, as we've seen, the Constitution reserves to Congress the power to make uniform laws of naturalization. Because of President Obama's unlawful action, about 700,000 people are now in a kind of legal limbo. President Trump did the right thing as a matter of law by ending DACA, though as a matter of policy, he'd prefer its beneficiaries don't face deportation. Democrats agree, as do a lot of Republicans. So the question isn't so much about deportation, but rather if and what kind of compromise Congress can strike. Here's where the RAISE Act comes in. We can, if we choose, grant citizenship to those illegal immigrants who came here through no fault of their own as kids and who otherwise have been law-abiding, productive citizens. But if we do, it will have the effect of legalizing, through chain migration, their parents, the very people who created the problem by bringing the kids here illegally. Some like to say that children shouldn't pay for the crimes of the parents, but surely parents can pay for the crimes of the parents. And that's to say nothing of their siblings and spouses. And then all the second and third order chain migration, those people create. So simply codifying DACA without ending chain migration would rapidly accelerate the wave of unskilled immigrant labor that's been depressing the wages of working Americans. An obvious compromise, then, is to pair any attempt to codify DACA with a reform of the green card system to protect American workers. A standalone amnesty will not do, nor will an amnesty with vague promises of border security, which never seem to materialize or get funded once the pressure is off Congress. But if we codify DACA along with the reforms in the RAISE Act, we will protect working Americans from the worst consequences of President Obama's irresponsible decision. President Trump has said that chain migration must be ended in any legislative compromise, and he's highlighted the RAISE Act as a good starting point for those negotiations. I support that approach, and I'm committed to working with my colleagues, Democrats and Republicans alike, on a deal that protects American workers and strengthens our community. Immigration has emerged in recent years as a kind of acid test for our leaders, a test that they mostly fail. Our cosmopolitan elite in both parties have pursued a radical immigration policy that's inconsistent with our history and our political tradition. They've celebrated the American idea, yet undermined the actual American people of the here and now. They've forgotten that the Declaration speaks of one people and the Constitution of we the people. At the same time, they've enriched themselves and improved their quality of life while creating a new class of forgotten men. There's probably no issue that calls more for an America First approach than immigration. After all, the guidepost of our immigration policy should be putting Americans first, not foreigners and not a tiny elite. Our immigration policy should serve the wealth and strength of our people, as Madison said in that first Congress. It should not divide our nation, impoverish our workers, or promote hyphenated Americanism. Citizenship is the most cherished thing our nation can bestow. Our governing class ought to treat it as something special. We ought to put the interests of our citizens first and welcome those foreigners best prepared to handle the duties of citizenship and contribute positively to our country. When we do, our fellow Americans will begin to trust us once again. And that is the end of the adaptation from a speech delivered on September 18th in Washington, D.C. by Tom Cotton, a U.S. Senator from Arkansas, called Immigration in the National Interest, and it's from an issue of Imprimis that's October 2017, volume 46, number 10, and it's a publication of Hillsdale College. A couple of quick comments. First of all, one of the things about immigration that's really wrong is the constant use of the word migrants and migration instead of immigrants and emigrants. Animals migrate. Human beings immigrate and emigrate. The difference is property. The United States is the property, writ large, of the American people. Mexico is the property of the Mexican people. And so that's why we have borders to delineate which property belongs to whom. It's like having a fence around your house to help delineate what constitutes your property from your neighbor's property. The other thing is that Mr. Cotton bemoans or bewails President Obama's activities in office as it relates to immigration, in particular the DACA Act, and saying several times that it was illegal, unconstitutional. And yet, Congress, the Republican Congress, did nothing about it. The Republican Congress could have very easily, and they had if he's doing something that's blatantly unconstitutional, could have very easily impeached President Obama and very possibly removed him from office or censured him or whatever the punishment was that they would find appropriate. But the reason that we have DACA and that DACA is an issue today is the fault not of the President Obama, not of the Democrats, but the fault again of the Republican Party and conservatives in particular, because the Republicans and the conservatives either don't know what they're doing or they don't care what they're doing, or they're craven. They're scared. And if they had any guts or they had any knowledge of what it is that they should have been doing in the first place, we wouldn't have DACA today, and it wouldn't be an issue. So on Thursday, I will be reading from another issue of Imprimis, the November 2017 issue. And until then, I hope everybody had a Merry Christmas. And until Thursday, thank you very much for joining me. Have a great day.